Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to talk about Aero today. Today we're going to discuss a little bit of how Aero helps streamline your workflow with a couple of the features that are integrated into Aero. One is its sync with QBO, also the integration with Gmail. We're going to review how the built-in timer works, and finally we're going to talk about one of my favorite features, the Quicklinks and the Quick Note. So to start with, in Aero, the timer is completely integrated. So anytime you work on a task, the timer starts up right away. Time's silently being recorded in the background. As I'm working on the task, as I'm checking off my task, the timer keeps running. Once I've finished that task, I can save it and complete it. I can save it and defer it. Or if I want to pause the timer for a minute, because I need to run out to lunch, whatever, I don't want to keep timing that event, the timer will pause. I can edit the timer. I can restart it from here, and it'll just pick up where it left off. I can also save and defer this task if I want to work on it later. And when I save and defer, it actually stops this particular task, records a time entry, but the task is still going to show up on my to-do list. So now you can see this task to do the marketing is still on my to-do list. It says it's deferred. If I pick it up again now, the timer is going to start all over again because that is now a new time event on in the time tracking entries. So we'll just stop this again, reset it because I opened it, I didn't really mean to. And now if I click back on my Aero list, it will just be still deferred as it was before. So what's the advantage of having that time running in the background? Obviously, if you're going to bill your clients for time on a time basis, you want to be able to track all of that time. If you're doing payroll and you're paying people by the hour, being able to track how much time they're actually spent working is awesome, and not having to make them log in and log out on a time card. Even if you're doing value billing, we feel it's really important to be able to track your time because those are the metrics that you're going to use to determine whether or not your value billing is profitable. So there's lots of reasons why the time tracking is a great feature. I like that I never have to worry about whether my timer is running or not. I don't have to track my time. I can just keep track of it. And it gives me, even though I'm on a salary, I don't bill by the hour, it gives me a great sense of where I spent my day when I look back on it. The other thing that is great about time is now if I go back and look at my timesheet for the day, I can see the time that I spent. Here's my timesheet for the week. So you can see the entry that we made, reading the email, creating the email and sending the draft, that one that we tested there. If I needed to edit this for some reason, maybe I had recorded the time by error, I can edit it from here. And this is a function of whether or not I have the appropriate privileges to do that, which we're not really going to talk about today. But most tasks in Aero, you can give people the authority to do them or not, depending on what security level you assign them. So now that that time is recorded in Aero, I can send that off to QBO if I wanted to. We have another account that we have that's connected to QBO, and that one here has some time entries. We're going to take a look at this one task for Adam's Candy Shop. If I start that task, and I'm going to edit the time to just record some time on there. So let's say I spent 20 minutes on that task, and I'm going to go ahead and save and complete the task. Now, if I look in my timesheet, that time is recorded along with some other time that I spent on the same task. Now, if I go into QuickBooks Online and I look at my timesheet, and that's the time for Jenny Miller, you can see that time that I just recorded, that 20 minutes, now shows up in my timesheet in QBO. Since it's billable, I can go into Adam's Candy Shop if I want to and add that to an invoice. If I click on a new action for Adam's Candy Shop and I want to create an invoice, here's my time in the billable drawer that I can now just pop right onto that invoice. Without having to do a lot of gyrations, it made it very simple. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about, and kind of leading into the QuickBooks Online integration, was kind of explaining a little bit more about what does and what doesn't sync with QBO. When you initially connect your Aero account to a QuickBooks Online account, what comes over from QuickBooks Online is all of your customers, your vendors, all your classes, and all your service items. So those all get created in your Aero account automatically for you. All the contacts that are associated with those customers and vendors, that initial first and last name that's on the QuickBooks Online account, comes into Aero as a contact. And after that, customers go back and forth both ways. But we do recommend as best practices that you make changes to customers in Aero because we have a lot more fields there. After the initial sync, vendors only get pushed from QBO to Aero. So you'd want to change those in QuickBooks Online. Contacts only go from QBO to Aero that one time. So after that, any additional contacts that you want to set up for your company need to be set up in Aero, and they won't sync back to QBO. Service items only go from QBO to Aero. So any additions or changes you make to your service items should be done in QBO, and then they'll be reflected in Aero. And again, classes are the same as service items. They only go from QBO to Aero, so any changes need to be done in there. Time tracking entries, however, get pushed from Aero to QBO. They don't go back round trip. So if you have time tracking entries that are in QBO, they don't get pulled into Aero at this point. But once they're in QBO, as we saw, you can use them to do invoicing, or you can do your employee payroll. You determine what your syncing preferences are for those time tracking in the My Company settings. If you check Auto Sync Time, then everything you have in Aero, every time you create that time tracking entry, it will magically appear in your QBO account, the way we saw it in the other demo account. Most of our clients like to keep that auto sync time off, and that lets them go into the Manage Time dashboard and approve these times before they're sent to QBO. Once they've reviewed it, determined that's appropriate, and that the employee or they have created all the right fields, they've got the right rates in there, then you can uncheck the Do Not Sync, and it'll go straight into QuickBooks. The hourly rate on this time billing here comes again from the My Company settings. When you set up your company initially, you can choose a default hourly rate, and that's going to be company-wide. But then you have the option of deciding when you create a time tracking entry, at what level do you want that to be assigned. If you want to have different rates for each customer, then choose that. If you want to have one rate for the entire company, choose that. If you have different billing rates by team member, choose that. And then if you want to use the item rate that's set up in QuickBooks, then choose that. And of course, you can override that on a case-by-case basis at any point in time. This is just what automatically gets pulled in. So once you've got that unchecked to sync your time, you'll want to go in and, after you're done approving your time, and go to the Admin tab and click on QBO Sync. And this particular account is not set up to sync to QBO, so I will get an error message when I try that. But otherwise, you would get a link, as in this account, where you do the QBO Sync, and it will go through, think about it for a minute, and then give you a success message that all these different things have now synced to QBO. In your Aero list, you'll notice we have a couple different kinds of icons over on the left here. We have some arrows. These are tasks. We have some arrows that have a little I for information. These are generally ones that were set up as a quick note, and we'll see how to do that in a minute. But this kind of indicates that it does need more information. If I were to click on this, you can see there's not a lot of stuff filled in here, and I might need to change the category so it's the right time. I probably have to change the time. I may or may not want to change the type, and then that now shows up in my Aero list as a task. The other icons we have here are actually email. We've built Aero so that you can set it up to automatically pull all your Gmail into Aero, and you can set that up in the setup of the team member. So every team member can set up their own preferences about whether or not they want their Gmail in there. Once you enter your Gmail ID and your password, and then you also have to check this box that you want it to check your email. So if you have all those things set up, then when you're in your Aero list and you want to check your email, if you go into Arrows and you hit check email and refresh list, it will pull in any emails that are in your list, in your email inbox. So here's a couple emails. Here's one from Sarah Sivison and one from Google. And if I click check email and refresh my list, it will go out and check my Google inbox and pull a new email in. And you can see it pulled in the new email from Sarah Sivison. It did not pull in the email from Google because Google is not set up as one of the contacts in my Aero account. The idea being we don't want to have your Aero list of tasks cluttered up with a bunch of emails that are not important for you to take care of. So when you have your contacts set up and you manage these here, you can decide when you look at a contact whether or not you want to receive email from them. Once you've decided that, it determines whether or not their emails will show up in your list. Typically, you'd want emails from important clients to show up here, possibly from coworkers, but you don't want email from the entire world showing up in your list. So once you've got the emails in your list, you can click on it to open it up. As you're reading it, the timer's going. This is great for those clients that email you incessantly, and you can finally keep track of how much time you're actually spending reading and responding to their emails. You can change the type. If you need to assign that to a particular client, you can have the company should pull in right there. Now I have some reply options. I can actually even reply straight in the email. I can select who I'm going to reply to. I'm going to type the reply. I can then either mark this as read and complete. I can read it and defer it. I can read it and create a draft reply. If I do that, if I read and mark that as a draft reply, it now stays in my task list, but it's now orange to indicate that I've started this, but I still need to finish it. Once I've done that, it will now show up in my Google inbox as Aero imported, and it'll be marked as read. So I don't have to read these things twice, but I do know that it's in Aero. So I've got some security that is captured. So I also have the option in Aero of actually creating an email. If I'm in the middle of a task and I decide that I need to email the client, I can go to one of these quick links here and I can start an email. That lets me work on this email while the other task is running if I want to, or I can pause this task if it's something completely unrelated. Once I write this email and send it off, that'll record it as an activity in that client file, as well as track the time I spent writing the email. Also in Aero, we have the ability for you to create a bunch of default templates for emails that your team sends over and over again, so that when you pull that template out, it's got a bunch of fields that are already entered. You can enter the new fields, and you don't have to sort of start from scratch every time. This is great for those emails that your team does constantly to clients. So I'll save and complete that, and it actually probably won't complete because I don't have a contact listed here, so I'm just going to go ahead and close it for now. Once I've sent an email from Aero, and I'll go back to my work list and send emails, they will show up in my sent mail so that I can see both places where that email is. They'll also show up if I'm looking at the company arrows. Let's see. Here's some tasks that I've completed. The email would show up in here as well if I had sent this email from this client. So let's talk a little bit more about this Quicklinks. Quicklinks is a fast way to get to some different tasks that you might have to do during the day. If you're in the middle of a task and you need to start a new one, you can pause the timer for that task and then start a new task right away. and I'll just open that in a new tab. So that here's a new unscheduled task. Once I've got something written there, I can restart it. I can start typing my comments. Maybe the phone rang. I need to get that down. I'll take the comments in here. And then I'll just save and defer this. It's going to show back up in my Aero list, and I can go back and edit this later when I have more time to deal with it. And then I'll go back to my original task and keep going with what I was doing. I can also add a task, an appointment, or an email to do later if I need to make a note to myself to do something new. Once I add a task, that will open it in another window. I can make a note that I need to do this task this afternoon, tomorrow. I can also assign it to somebody else if I have sufficient permissions in this file so that I can give them a task to do, maybe related to what I'm doing now, maybe completely random thought that crept into my mind while I was supposed to be doing something else. And then this is one of my favorite features. This Quicklinks feature here lets me add a note, and that's just the very most basic type of brief task. There's only one required field here, and I can just write a quick note to myself just to remind myself so I don't have to have that thought running around in my head anymore. If I create that note, that's going to now show back up in my Aero list, needing a little bit more information, just like that one we saw earlier. But I can also use that create a note feature from my phone. If I have a do just save to my iPhone, I can use this create note feature, and I'll just type on here that I need to do task number 2. And then if I want to go to the body of the task, I can even use the microphone feature to record what I want to say. I use this a lot when I'm out walking, and I tend to have these deep, meaningful thoughts when I'm walking the dog that I want to capture for later. I can just quick note this, and then it actually will show up in my Aero list when I get back to the office. So there's my note, and now when I refresh my Aero list, my new task will show up right there that I just created. So I love this feature. I use this all the time. So hopefully you've gotten a brief overview of some of the streamlining features in Aero. Thanks everybody for your time.